this afternoon. Thanks for everyone coming out. It's my pleasure to introduce the faculty lectureship today. The title is Unlocking Horizons, Reading Clinic 2023. We'll have a team presentation today, not on Teams, but team. All right, Dr. Jackson and Dr. Nyabando from the College of Education and Technology is going to present. As always, I want to thank the committee, the lectureship committee, Dr. Del Parto, Dr. Starr, Dr. Varela, Dr. Wagner, and Dr. Zhang for helping make this happen by choosing the lectureship participants. And as always, I want to thank the Comm Services, John Hauser and Adam Aragon for helping present this beyond today. And Sodexo, Maddie and Melissa Rose, for the refreshments that we'll have after the presentation. As always, this is a great time to ask questions. And without further ado, let's have our lectureship.
Well, thank you so much for coming, everybody. So I'm Dr. Elizabeth Jackson. I'm an assistant professor of early childhood special education. And
I am Dr. Tsitsi Nyabando, and I'm assistant professor of early childhood education. Sometimes I forget and I say I'm special ed because my first name takes special education, early childhood. Yeah.
So like Dr. Montgomery said, I mean, y'all everybody knows that. So if you want to stop, ask questions, we're more than happy to ask or answer during the presentation rather than waiting to the end.
Yes, that would be really good. If you have any comments or questions during the presentation, please feel free to just jump in and ask your questions. So today we're going to be talking about a reading clinic that we did in the summer of 2023. And this reading clinic was brought about because of several things. It was something that the college used to do before, and our college was interested in doing it again. And we want to share with you some statistics which shows the need for this reading clinic, why it is necessary or why it's important. And we're going to share some data from at the national level, at the state level, and then from our surrounding school districts. So the data that we have here shows average reading scores at 4th grade level for students. And when you look at this data, you can actually see that the data that is on this website shows that there isn't really growth in terms of reading scores from the year 2019 to 2022. It's actually going down. And there isn't any significant difference when you compare the reading scores between the year 2022 and the year 1992, which is very concerning. And the average scores are reported on the NMP from on a range of 0 to 500. So looking at this, we had said earlier on, they're recorded on a range of 0 to 500. And in 2022, at national level, it was 216, New Mexico was 202. 2019, 219 and 208. 2017, 221 and 208. 221 and 207 in 2015. And remember, it's on a range of 0 to 500. And looking at the school districts closest to us, Clovis, Dora, Floyd, and Portales, the data we're just showing is for kindergarten to 4th grade. One thing that we found really concerning when you're looking at this data is that there's a common trend actually for our school districts. The reading scores are quite high in kindergarten up to like 2nd grade, but then from 3rd grade going forward, the reading scores started going down, with the only exception of Dora just for 4th grade. But 5th grade for Dora, these reading scores were low again. So this really shows that need for intervention of some sort in reading for our local school districts in our local area. Something more current, data that is more current, 2022 to 2023, looking at the schools that are in our local area, Brown, 0.2 on a 1.0 scale, and 0.44 for Dora, and Floyd, 0.45 and 0.17. And this is just the average ELA proficiency scores.
So you could see that by what Dr. Nyabando was saying, the need for some type of intervention. So we were fortunate enough to have the College of Education fund what we call the reading clinic. So when you hear us say the reading clinic, it's like everybody knows the reading clinic. We had, so of course, question like who are we having an intervention for? So the participants. The first thing we did was we started recruitment. So as you can see, we have an English version and a Spanish version. So think about our surrounding districts. A lot of people are Spanish speaking. We sent out an English version and we were getting requests about another, a Spanish version. So of course, the need of our community is who we want to have. So we made everything that we presented in English and Spanish as well. So we sent out flyers to our surrounding districts, so Floyd, Dora, Clovis, and Portales. We emailed principals. A lot of principals responded, said, great, this is awesome. They let their teachers know, their students know. Our TEO office has a really, really good rapport with a lot of our principals, so we actually had them help us as well to contact past ENMU graduates. Where are they teaching? Do they have any students that may be interested, may benefit from this reading clinic? So we had their recommendations. We used, and we'll talk about this in later, a selection process using the Woodcock-Johnson. So when it came to inclusion, we wanted to include anybody that was reading below grade level. The exclusion criteria was those who were reading above grade level or on grade level, but good thing for us is everybody who we did assess, they were either on or below grade level. So we were actually able to help everybody and anybody who was interested in the reading clinic.
Yeah, except for a few people who pulled out last minute. Yeah, so we tested them, but then they said they lived too far and it was going to be a lot of time commitment for them to drive here.
And we did have a couple from Farwell that were driving. I mean, we've had a couple that were driving an hour because of how good it was, of the reading clinic. So we did recruit a couple of our ENMU students that were currently in Red 350, 375. Specifically, so for those of you who don't know, these two classes, they teach primarily the reading skills pre-K to middle school, and they focus on those literacy levels like phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, the big five is what we call them. So we know that they are knowledgeable and have been working already with students that have reading difficulties. We did interviews, so we wanted to know their comfortability with working with children. We want to know their experience and what they've learned in 350 and 375, because our hope at this point was to say, okay, what you're learning, we want you to now implement and work with the lead teacher or a district teacher and planning some activities. And that's what they did. They did daily and weekly lesson planning. They had to do it on an Excel, not Excel, Google.
Yeah, we created a team for them, so they shared documents in that team.
And they shared and they came up with plans. They collaborated with one another as well as the district lead teachers. And they came up with the lesson plans. They told us what they wanted. They had envision. And what we wanted to do was have them build on what the students were already learning one-on-one with lead teachers. And so here, I can't remember what the lesson was, but whatever they were learning in their one-on-one, they would do something, some type of activity that kind of built on that. So they would do, they wrote stories, they wrote books, they wrote poems and things like that, and it built on what they were learning with their lead teacher.
Yeah, and they also played some games which were related to what they were learning with the lead teachers.
They also help with transitions, and to me, that's a big deal. So Dr. Nyabando, I think, will talk about, it was 45-minute sessions. We wanted the students not to lose any type of a minute in that 45-minute session. So the students will already take the student there, drop the student off with the lead teacher, and then bring the other student back. So there was never a missed opportunity for that student to get their full time.
And to recruit the teachers from the school districts, what we did, we communicated once again and reached out to the school principals using the relationships that have already been established with their teacher education office and education professors in general. So we emailed principals and sent out a flyer asking them if they had any recommendations for teachers who would be really great or who were good teachers for reading. We sent out these flyers to Clovis, to Dora, and to Portales. And the flyers had a link, so we sent them electronically and also sent hard copies. And using that link, the teachers were interested, then registered enter their information, contact information, the grade levels they were teaching, and other information. And we reached out to them and set up interviews with each and every one of them. So we had 30-minute interviews with every teacher where we talked about their interests, we talked about the grade level they taught, we talked about their experience teaching young children, especially literacy related and reading related. And they shared with us their success stories, and they also had to let us know if they were committed to be available the whole month of June, because we didn't want to change instructors during the reading clinic. So we had a few who had plans for vacation, for instance, and they'll say, okay, we're not going to be available for a week or for some days, so they didn't qualify for this. So after the interviews, we went ahead and compiled a list for all the teachers who were interested, and we started talking about reading strategies. We shared the data from the assessment with them. Another thing that we did at that point was pairing them up with our ENMU students who had already taken the Reading 350 class and 375 class. So, for instance, if somebody was interested in teaching pre-K, we found a student who was in early childhood education, for instance, who will be teaching pre-K or will be teaching kindergarten, who will be interested in working with that teacher. Elizabeth is going to be talking about assessment.
So the assessment that we used was the Woodcock-Johnson Reading Mastery Test, the 3rd edition. The reason we chose this, it's valid and reliable, but also because it touched on these specific reading skills. So your phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, reading fluency, and text comprehension. And that's very important because my next photo shows you. It has to do with what our students are already learning in the school. So they need, our goal, everybody's goal in life, is to be at that reading comprehension level. How do they get there? How can they get there? Well, they need that phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, and fluency in order to gain that reading comprehension or that listening comprehension. Without that, they're not going to be successful in reading. And so our schools focus on this, and as the state of New Mexico, we focus on that science of reading, and this is what it entails. So looking back at the Woodcock-Johnson, it touches on everything that what our schools are already teaching or what our students to know. So these are my photos that are kind of weird looking. I learned something new today of how to scan on my phone. I feel like I'm with a new generation. So these were taken by my phone, so they look still kind of a little weird. But the Woodcock-Johnson, it focuses on 9 sections. I only showed a couple few that the photos came out kind of okay. But so letter identification. Do the students know what an uppercase versus a lowercase is? Phonological awareness. We looked at beginning sound letters, rhyming. Can they put pop, corn together to form popcorn? We looked at rapid automatic naming. Do they know the C? Do they know, how fast do they know the letters? How fast do they know the numbers? Listening comprehension, we played a small paragraph on a CD. They listened to the CD, I stopped the CD, I asked the question, they answered with a response. So that's the listening comprehension. And then the word comprehension is if you know what this word is. So antonyms and synonyms, do they know what those are? So we looked at all those different concepts. At the end of the Woodcock-Johnson, you get tons of papers, tons of assessments, tons of results. What do you do with that? Like, what do you do? The good thing and what we focused on was the instructional level profile. So this student right here, the dotted line is where they're supposed to be at according to their age and their grade level. This student, you could see when it came to listening comprehension, I have my little, she was already at a 4th grade level when it came to listening comprehension. But look where she is at for rapid phonological awareness and rapid automatic naming. She's only at the K.5 level. So the good thing about the reading clinic is we focus specifically on those areas in which the student was not on grade level. So this student got tailored one-on-one instruction in rapid automatic naming and phonological awareness. Broadly, we focused on everything else, but specifically, we made sure we focused on those 2 levels. So we did go through a training over a 2-day period to figure out, I've never learned how to administer the Woodcock-Johnson. We have Dr. Kathleen Taylor, also known as Donaldson. She was the very first director of the very first reading clinic. This was done before a previous couple years ago. She also assisted in developing some form of the Woodcock-Johnson. So very reliable, very experienced professor. We used real participants. And when I mean real, we had faculty members to allow us to assess their children. So we got that real, authentic assessment when it comes to a child. We all know if we test adults, you're not going to get the same responses. You're not going to get the same scoring. So we wanted that real training. We all were inter-rated, this is word, I can never say it all day, inter-rated reliability. So if I assessed and Dr. Nyabando assessed, we made sure that we were reliable in what was correct versus incorrect. And then there were 4 faculty members that were trained over the 2 days. So a lot of us worked together.
Yeah, and of the 4 faculty members who were trained, 3 of us participated in the real assessment or implementing that. So what we did was we asked the families or the parents to bring their children to us in the College of Education. So we assessed them before the reading clinic started. And then after we collected that data and the results, we shared each student's data with the teacher that they were going to be working with. So the way we assigned the student to the teachers was once again, we had to figure out what the teacher was interested, which grade level the teacher was interested in teaching. And we had 2 students, for instance, we had an IEP. So if a teacher was going to be working with a student with an IEP, we had them work with only 2 students. And then if they're working with students who were reading a little bit above, then they worked with 3 students. So the maximum number of students that each of the teachers had was 3 students, except for just one who had 2 students. So what we did after that was we met with the teachers where we did kind of an orientation before the reading clinic really started. We shared the data that we had. We shared with them what the assessment was all about and what the data meant. And we gave them an hour of planning each and every day. So most of them would come an hour early, or they'll stay after the reading clinic for an hour to plan. And they could then work with the ENMU student during planning and collaborate in other ways, materials and all those kind of things. And one-on-one instruction was for 45 minutes, as shared by Elizabeth earlier on. Lesson plans were shared with us. So the teachers shared lesson plans with us, and sometimes we would go around and they would share with us if they needed more materials or something specific that you didn't have already that would help them with the instruction they were doing. And they also had an opportunity to talk with the parents especially during pickup times, because the teachers were there pickup, and they were there before as well, because the students came very early because they had breakfast there. And the teachers were doing the one-on-one, the planning at that time, then they'll start the one-on-one after that.
And then anything that our ENMU teachers did versus our lead teachers, we had teams for them. So they were easily able to collaborate with one another. We were able to go into the file and see. We asked them to do weekly lesson plans on each student. So it was very simple lesson plan formatting. What did they work on? Was there any need for anything that material-wise that they needed, or did they notice any growth or any change or anything like that? So we kind of informally collected data throughout the week, and we just seen, okay, so-and-so was working on this, still having difficulties with this. But then you also occasionally saw they learned 5 words today, in just a week. So we were able. That was the good thing about Google Teams, is we were able to view everything that was going on.
Yeah, and we're also able to share some of that data with the parents as well. Most of the parents were really interested in knowing what their children were learning, and our teachers would sometimes share resources with the parents to take home so that they could extend on whatever learning was going on during that time. So these are just some examples of some of the activities that they did. One of the things that we emphasized when we were talking with the teachers was we wanted them to create lesson plans that were very interactive and engaging, and that would involve a lot of hands-on learning experiences, because that's how young children learn most of the times. So these are just some of examples of some of the activities they did. In this picture here, we can see one of the teachers working with an ENMU student and the 2 students that were assigned to them, and they were doing hopscotch, where they're jumping to phonic symbols and saying the corresponding sounds. And here's another example. They would do things like magnetic word play, phonics games, and different kinds of activities.
So we just try to avoid the worksheet, the typical paper pencil. We wanted everything to be interactive, because the more interactive, the more fun, and they're still learning.
Yeah, and it was 45 minutes after all. So if they are going to be doing 45 minutes with like a second grader or a first grader, it's going to be so difficult for them to be engaged for that long. So the interesting thing is we would usually go around and see what was going on. And almost every time, you always see the students so engaged because there was so much engagement. The activities were hands-on and interactive as well. So at the end of the reading clinic, we did the post test using the same scale. So they have a post test and a pre-test. So we use that. After we collected that data, we ran a paired samples t-test and SPSS to see if there was any significant difference between the post-test scores and the pre-test scores. And we set our level of significance at 0.01. So these were the 8 areas that we assessed. So we had pairs of tests for the pre-test for letter identification, word identification, listening comprehension, and the rest. And this is the output table. And it's very tiny. Some of you might be able to read. But one thing that we noticed when I just looking at the data, descriptive statistics-wise, was that the means for before and after, there was a difference in the mean scores. There was an increase in almost everything. But when you're looking at the statistical significance after the t-test, there are only 2 areas where there were statistically significant differences between the pre and the post-test scores. And that was phonemic awareness and listening comprehension. And we were kind of not very surprised with the data because this reading clinic was only for 1 week. And our sample size was very small, so we only had 16 students. So we are hoping that in the future, when we start working on the reading clinic again, we're making some changes, and it's going to help us really see what is going on, focusing still on these specific areas to see where there's growth and what you might need to do to increase growth in the different areas. Future plans?
So before I talk about future plans, are there any questions as far as like the reading clinic in general?
Or comments?
So the statistics, go back to the results.
Go back.
Can you do that? So the SD, what?
The standard deviation.
Standard deviation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What are your sample sizes?
It was only 16.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a very small sample size.
And like Dr. Nyabando said, we weren't too surprised because, again, we only focused on those skills that they were having difficulties with versus every single skill. So when you're looking at all of it, yeah, we taught them every skill, but we focused majority on what they were having difficulties with.
Yeah, and even the instructional time was not much. Say, for example, the example that Elizabeth showed earlier on of that student who didn't struggle with listening comprehension, but struggling with other areas as well. So even though the instruction was tailored for, let's say, 5 areas or 4 areas for her, because of the time that we had, they didn't get a lot of instruction to really have a significant difference. Mm-hmm. We would hope to have more instructional time, like even throughout the year probably, or for a longer period of time, where we focus on the different areas for a while.
So some of these, the significance is not very high.
Yeah.
Some of the work, the pairing,
Mm-hmm.
if you try to think about what that might signify, what those pairs were different from the others?
So the pairs, it was for the different areas. Like, for instance, the first one was letter identification. So like you said, I think when you're thinking about it, we're thinking probably it has something to do with the instruction, focus or intensity for the instruction for that area. So when you are going to be planning for the future, for instance, we're going to find more ways probably to make sure that our instruction is really structured to do more for that area and lengthen the instructional time probably. That's what we just thought might be there. I think there are several factors at play here because really we didn't control for a lot of variables as well. Mm-hmm.
All right, so future plans. So I have a kind of a chart here that kind of describes what we did in 2023, and then our hopes for the future reading clinic. So in 2023, we only had 16 participants. Our hope is to double, if not to have more than 16. We have a lot of a lot of parents that are very, very interested in the reading clinic. They felt that their child succeeded. They want their child to be in it as well as their friends and other people in the future. We used the Woodcock-Johnson, and then we had the teachers lead the instruction. In the future, we want the instruction to be more uniform. So if I'm struggling in rapid name and Dr. Nyabando is struggling in rapid name, we need to be taught the same way. It needs to be uniformed. Before the ENMU professors were trained in the Woodcock-Johnson, we had a lot of lead teachers and our students interested in learning how to be trained in it. So they need to be trained in it. We're more than happy to help them get trained in it. It gains their, helps them with their assessment.
Yeah, and also understanding. We think that if they get trained on the scale, it helps them understand what the test, and they need to help them even when creating instruction for those students.
I say we had less structured instruction. This is our first time doing this. We had no really rules, expectations. We just kind of just went with the flow. We kind of just let the teachers lead. They knew best how to teach the students, so we just let them do that. In the future, we want to be more like how to do something. We have really, really good reading professors here in our department, in which can help us learn what are those reading strategies, what are those reading interventions we can use. And then again, take everything that how to and make the instruction more uniformed. We did collect some data. We went into it just saying we're going to do a pre-test and a post-test. That was it. We really not no expectations. In the future, we will like to be more research-based. We want to make sure that we're collecting data more often. We want to get the IRB, not going, but IRB approval. We want to make it more research-based, more so we can show how beneficial this reading clinic really is.
Yeah, another thing, sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Another thing I want to add, which we kind of did, was collecting some qualitative data as well, because I think that's very important. We did collect some, but they were not very structured. We had a few questions for teachers and for parents, but we are planning to have more interview questions that will help us interpret or see what is really happening in the qualitative data part.
And then also, when it comes to having our reading professors help, we are also being trained in letters training, which our school district lead teachers, our teachers are being trained in. So even as us as professors, we want to know how our district teachers are teaching our students. So then we can better be equipped to teach them and to help them along the way as well.
Yeah.
And then lastly, that we were ENMU funded. We, in the future, we have written a New Mexico literacy grant in which we're hoping to be, constantly funded so we can help our community even more.
So would this be more extended throughout the school year? I think you already mentioned.
Good question. Yes. So before this was just a June reading clinic. In the future, we want to do that constant data collection throughout the school year. We want to do every 3 months, every 6 months. Are they taking what they learned and then using it in school? How are we helping them in the school? It was called a summer reading clinic, but we want to be more of a community reading clinic to help.
Capacity-wise, are you guys looking to expand this to a lot more people and go more statewide, or is this going to stay local here for Taos Clovis? You guys are looking to do.
So,
What you think?
Because there's opportunities out there with summer reading to go
Mm-hmm.
with and with the technology we have now. I don't know. I mean, I was watching. You guys have a lot of, interpersonal relations and stuff like that. If you guys thought about taking it on Teams or virtually,
Oh, man.
would that work? And would that the capacity, or is that too far down the road?
I personally feel it's probably too far down the road because it was so impactful for our community. I would rather let's build our community and our students, especially because as Dr. Nyabando showed at the beginning, look at Clovis, Portales, Dora, Floyd. The reading levels are below the state level. So let's focus on our community and our surrounding areas. And then that's a great idea. I don't know how we would do all that, but technology,
I just meant
it's unlimited.
Foundation stuff with the summer reading program that we do out of town services. So that's why I asked,
Yeah.
how big you guys would want to go with something.
Dr. Davis.
Dr. Davis.
Clinic last summer, and I really is the model for how the state wants to move. We had really anticipated some additional funding so that we would be able to do something similar. The participants, but like everything else, we're waiting on people to make decisions, and we haven't received any funding. The other thing that, if you don't mind me taking over your presentation, the other thing is that there's a lot of interest in a math clinic as well. And parents ask us about that. What about math? And so we have this big dream of having a year-round reading clinic and being able to add math as an additional content area. And if you look at the results from school districts around the state, there are not a lot of increases in proficiency in either reading or math. It seems like for a while we focused so much on reading that the work in math was not as impactful as it could have been. So there's a huge need for this service right here in our own area. And being a university, we have access to students who need field placement hours and need opportunities to practice. So it's really, as I said, it's our dream that this becomes a year-round project that we sponsor, and our students do their field hours there, and they have the opportunity to practice with expert teachers, but everything is dependent upon funding.
Another thing is, Dr. Davis said, to really be able to provide the intense intervention that I think the students really need, you have to be in person. I think if we take it, especially with these young children, I don't think it will be as impactful if you do it online. It will be more impactful.
So it wasn't just Dr. Nyabando and I. There was a lot of people that helped with the reading clinic. We did have guest speakers. Guest speakers included President Johnson, Dean Hurren, Dr. Davis. And we just wanted to show the impact of how adults are still being included in reading. Reading is fun. And we wanted the students to realize that you don't have to just be a kindergartner or a second grader to say reading is fun. As an adult, reading is fun. And so we're fortunate enough to have some faculty members come and read and show their excitement, give us their favorite book and read to the students and talk to and communicate with them. Like Dr. Nyabando said, we did collect informal data from the teachers, the parents, and our ENMU students about the reading clinic. So one teacher comment was, I love that we had guest readers to read out loud all the fun activities that we provided for the students.
Let's say one more thing.
Yes. No, you're fine.
I went over and read one day, and I took two books with me that my kids had practiced memorized by the time they were the age of these kids. One was Where the Wild Things Are. The other one was The Little Old Lady Who Wasn't Afraid of Anything. It's really a Halloween book, but it's a fun book to read any time of the year. And so I asked the kids, who's heard this story before? With the exception of Kathy Good's little nieces who were there, none of them had ever heard Where the Wild Things Are, or probably most of the books that people brought to share. So huge exposure. And these two ladies were so wonderful. They were responsible for 95% or more of the planning that went into the clinic, and the day-to-day details that went into the clinic. They were on top of everything and made it a great experience.
Thank you. And another thing that I really liked was when people came to read and they shared their favorite books, we also got copies of that same book for the students to take home. So all the children got all the books that were read to them by the president, Dr. Davis. Oh, yeah. We had two people.
And then the books also were, so Dean Hurren also read Spanish. So a lot of our students are in our bilingual programs here in Portales. So the books were read in English and in Spanish for the reading clinic. So the students got a sense of both of them. Other people, we had Dr. Good come, we had Ms. Massey and Dr. Wagner come and read as well. A teacher comment, it was nice to collaborate and see that we noticed the same things and can work with that to drive what we needed to target next. So that's where we had the lead teacher paired with our ENMU students. They learned from each other. They learned that they were seeing the same things. A parent, I appreciate that S learned her sight words before going into kindergarten. Sight words into kindergarten. In a 1 month, 4 days for half a day, that kindergarten student was focusing only on sight words. Everything else, you know, she may have had, or he may have had some issues with, but look at the sight words. They learned the sight words before kindergarten. So very, very impactful.
Yeah, and we're really hoping this is going to be year long because we were worried about the students losing what they'd gained, you know, in July. So we hope that we'll get funding to have it going up throughout the year, where we continuously meet the students, maybe during the semester, maybe once or twice, and we collaborate with other departments as well, like the communication disorders and all those other areas, so that the gains will be maintained throughout the year.
And like Tsitsi said, is every book that a person came and read, the students were able to take them home. A lot of these students don't have books at home. So the parents were like, are you sure? Like, yes, these are for you, you know. So giving the parents opportunities to read to their students at nighttime. It's just a book a week, you know. So our hopes is also that as well, to get more books so we can send home on a weekly basis, that the students are not reading the same thing where it becomes memorization, if they're actually learning from what they're reading. Any questions? Comments?
Ideas?
I think the smile is.
Yes, so these are
Those
all our
faces
little,
stand out.
our ENMU students, our teachers, and then the clinic participants. So everybody that was had some involvement in the reading clinic.
One of the things that really struck me was the level of in our teacher candidates when I went and I got to see what was going on. They were so proud in what they were doing, and they were with a cooperating teacher, but they were in the role of a teacher. They were planning. They were working with these kids in a level that this is a field experience far deeper than what a traditional field experience offers them. So, thank you guys.
Well, thank you so much for coming, taking time out of your midterm week. We're more than happy to answer any questions if you don't want to ask us now. And anything that you have advice, we're more than happy to take it.
Thank you.